It's a new month, and that means it's time for a new territory, as I'm back with Billy Garcia for more old school wrestling discussions. You ready?
Oh yeah, ready as ever. I'm totally looking forward to today's discussion because I have a personal connection to this one.
Well, we are going into the American Wrestling Association, aka the AWA. For those who don't know, the AWA was formed much like the WWF was formed out of... I mean, would you say it was formed out of spite from the National Wrestling Alliance?
Yeah, they were, it was very territorial back then, and the NWA would license, or sanction, as they like to say, territories, and, Vern Gagne, who was a very, very accomplished wrestler, was basically denied his turn as world champion, back in the late 50s, early 60s, and there were certain territories that pretty much were hogging the world champion, the booking of the world champion at the time. And that created a lot of strife in territories, and we saw breakaways because of it. And the AWA was one of those significant breakaways. At the time, in my opinion, it was the most significant breakaway.
I agree. I mean, because they even took, I believe the first AWA champion was Pat O'Connor. So they even took a big name from the NWA and Pat O'Connor.
Right. And everybody remembers the WWF history side of it with the whole Buddy Rogers and Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah.
And over the course of a large course of history, now 2017, it was a bigger deal for the WWF or the Triple WF, to break away from the NWA. But at the time, the AWA breaking away was huge because they had television, which in any era of wrestling, it's pretty much make or break as far as whether you're making the big dollars or whether you're just surviving.
True, and I also believe that it was the AWA who did it first, and then Vince Sr. and Toots Mont followed suit a few years later, breaking away from the National Wrestling Alliance.
Very, very true. Very true. Things happened slower back then.
Yeah.
So yeah, this played out over a course of years. Today is, in today's era, it would happen over a course of months. Back then, it took years. But
yeah,
you can't underestimate, especially Vern Gagne, who had so much clout amongst the workers that he was able to pull a lot of big names with him. And I can't wait to get into some of the big names because I think the younger crowd, they kind of missed out on some of these great workers from back in the day.
Yeah. Well, also to really, I guess, display the success that Vern had, he's the only one that didn't go back after he left.
Great point.
Because Vince ended up going back.
Yes. And I will say, one of Vern Gagne's strokes of genius is that he gets virtually zero credit for. Well, he was the first guy who married the whole idea of putting wrestlers in movies. He first did it with I think it might have been the Crusher. It could have been Mil Mascaras, but I'm gonna go with the Crusher just because my memories is leading me that way. And those Beach Blanket Bingo movies, if you remember from back in the day, the ones with a net full of cello and Frankie Avalon and those guys. Well, I'm kind of dating myself here.
I was just about to say, you're dating yourself again there, Billy.
For sure. But, he would put wrestlers in movies, and the most famous one is Hogan in Rocky III, but which Vince gets credit for, but Hogan wasn't with the WWF. He was with the He was with the AWA when that went down. And
no, Vince fired him for doing the movie.
Vince fired him, and he was with the AWA when the movie came out.
Yeah, he signed with Verne because Verne recognized the name value that he got from a successful movie like Rocky III.
Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead because that run and his feud against Nick Bockwinkel is kind of significant.
Yeah, we're in the '60s now, and we're jumping all the way to the '80s.
Yeah, we're jumping, but there were so many great wrestlers, and they were bloody matches. These were not like what you would expect from wrestling in the '60s. They were bloody matches. I mentioned the Crusher. He was a bit of a cartoon character, and his finishing maneuver was now it's called the European uppercut, but back then I think they called it the club or something. I forget the name of it, but aside from him, even he got bloodied sometimes. But aside from him, like the wrestlers were wrestlers. They were not sports entertainers. They were wrestlers.
Well, the thing I wanted to ask, and I'll probably discuss this again with my Texas wrestling expert. I feel like Verne had the strangest territory boundaries of anybody. Because if I'm right, Verne had Minnesota,
yes,
Michigan.
Yep.
Probably after Detroit wrestling went out of business, because I know the Sheik had Michigan for the longest time. I would guess he probably had the Dakotas if he wanted to run wrestling there. But he also had Colorado and Nevada.
Yeah, and you as well as Utah and he had what a lot of people overlook is that he had Winnipeg. Canadian wrestling fans were very underestimated at the time. Now we know better, but at the time they were very underestimated. And since he was just in the right area for that, being in Minnesota and Wisconsin and that whole area, it worked out for him that he pulled in on Canadian fans, especially in Winnipeg. He gets credit for Chicago as well, but I think Chicago's later on gets more associated with the WWF. So, but he gets credit for that as well. Las Vegas, up until the end, he was running weekly shows in Las Vegas that were seen on ESPN and some other networks. He has, like you said, he had some a unique set of territories.
Yeah.
That to this date, I think only he can claim that he had that group. Like, okay, WWE is worldwide, so they get everything, but still, I still feel like this is unique to Verne Gagne and the AWA.
Yeah, and I mean, the only other one that I could think of that had a wide territory was Bill Watts, but Bill Watts wasn't in the NWA. So he is on the same level of Verne, but Watts had Oklahoma, Watts had Missouri, Louisiana. That's not, like, as wide as Verne was, because Verne had, the most northern states.
Yeah.
And then he had states closer to the southern side of the country.
Yeah, the southwest.
Yeah, the southwest.
Yeah, he also had, I forgot to mention, Omaha, Nebraska, which people say, Omaha? Well, back then, it was different.
Yeah.
These territories were especially big with a network that doesn't exist anymore. A television network called I'm trying to remember the Dumont Network, which at the time, they were bigger than CBS. Some of these other networks, like Fox, didn't exist yet, and there were a lot of networks that didn't exist yet. So back then, the Dumont Network was the network, and those were the territories that were drawing a lot of viewership. And Verne Gagne had those territories, so it was huge.
For those wrestling fans that don't know, in the post World War II era, wrestling was very in a cold spell, per se.
Yeah.
Because that's also before, like, I would say probably around 48, 49 was before wrestling got on television. And then thanks to the aforementioned Dumont Network, wrestling got on television, and wrestlers weren't just seen in the arena anymore. They could be seen from your house. And stars like Verne Gagne became major stars in wrestling, as opposed to just, you know, somebody that a small number of people recognize.
Yeah, as opposed to a local.
Yeah.
A local star. They were now national.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
And, so yeah, all that gave power to the AWA when it was formed, and they took that and they ran with it, and we got some great stars. Mad Dog Vachon is one that comes to mind. I don't know how you feel about him, but I feel like he was one of the big stars of his era. Very violent, which I love. maybe I'm a little masochistic as far as my favorite kinds of wrestlers, but he lived up to his name. He was a Mad Dog.
Did I hear New Jack? No, I'm
Yeah, he definitely influenced a lot of that era that you alluded to, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, Mad Dog must have done something right if him and the Crusher had a feud for like 20 years.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. Wow. And it was bloody. It was awesome. I kind of wish that the WWE Network would go back and like remaster all those old matches.
Yeah,
Give us remastered with better sound, better picture, because those matches were great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now's as good a time as any. But first, I want to focus on a tag team.
Okay.
Ray the Crippler Stevens and Pat Patterson. Or wait, were they in the AWA? I know the Crippler was, but... Or were they just a tag team in San Francisco?
Well, good question.
I'm not sure.
Gotta look that one up.
Yeah.
Well, Crippler Stevens for sure was in the AWA. Yeah, the question is whether he and Pat Patterson were tag team in AWA. But Crippler Stevens for sure was there. Right, Crippler Stevens. Good question.
Well, let's just say for argument's sake he was, and have somebody in the comment section correct us.
Alright, yeah. Yeah, please comment and let us know. Yeah, for sure. You know what? Well, first of all, Pat Patterson, he's probably got right now the more fame of the two, but I always like Ray the Crippler Stevens more.
Yeah.
To me, he lived up to the name more than Chris Benoit did. As good as Chris Benoit was. Ray was a shooter. Just point blank. Like, the guy could twist anybody into a pretzel. But the tag team, it's kind of, how do I put it? They kind of married the idea that has since been copied a lot, of having the power guy and the finesse guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was their contribution, was that they came up, I don't know if they came up with it, but they certainly popularized the idea.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, the spot made famous by Ric Flair, furthered by Shawn Michaels, and now also done by Charlotte, was invented by the Crippler. When you get Irish whipped into the corner,
Yep.
flip over, go to the... wait, did he do the Ric Flair completion, or did he just do the rope flip and then fall to the floor?
I guess it depended on the match. I think he was more known for falling to the floor. But I think there was a few times where he stayed on the apron and would like get clotheslined on the apron or try to climb the ropes and then get slingshot in or something like that.
Yeah.
I think Ric Flair was the one who took it to the next level and got body slammed off the top rope. But yeah. This is because back then in that era when you got body slammed off the top rope, that was a pin. You wouldn't kick out of that.
But yeah, point is, Ray Stevens was the innovator of that spot, that particular spot, and Flair furthered it, Michaels furthered it, Hunter furthered it, Charlotte's doing it now, you know, but it all goes back to Ray Stevens.
It's a great spot.
Yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I agree. Well, you spoke about him a little bit before. Crusher.
The Crusher. As we used to say. Yeah, he was big in wrestling before Hulk Hogan, before superstar Billy Graham, before Ric Flair. He might have been, arguably speaking, he might have been one of the first stars that transcended pro wrestling into some mainstream. He was definitely amongst the first. I guess a lot of Latinos would argue Mil Mascaras, because Mil Mascaras did a lot of Mexican B movies.
Yeah.
A lot of like superhero Mexican Spanish B movies. But I argue, even though I'm Latino, I argue that the Crusher was probably the guy that a lot of people tried to emulate as far as trying to get themselves into the mainstream and being that big star that draws casual fans to wrestling.
Well, he could have been the first in the States to do it. Would that be more accurate, since you were saying that Mil Mascaras did a lot more in Mexico as far as movies?
Yeah, you know what? Maybe we could look at it that way. Mexican wrestling, I still see Mexican wrestling as big back then in Mexico as the AWA was in the United States back then, so it's a little bigger.
Yeah.
Mexican wrestling has expanded quite a bit over time, and rightfully so. It's great. But I can see what you're saying, where we just divide things up and give the Crusher the credit in the U.S. and Mil Mascaras the credit in Mexico. But I still think Mil wasn't as big as the Crusher as far as mass appeal, as far as maybe number of audience individuals.
Well, would you say that Crusher is more known for his time with Dick the Bruiser than he is as singles? Or would you say it depended on the territory?
It depended on the territory, because the aforementioned feud, the 20-year feud, was it's one of those defining feuds of the AWA.
Yeah.
But that tag team, how do I put? They were the mega powers of their era, for lack of a better term. They were both big. The Crusher was bigger, but they were still, arguably the two mainstays of pro wrestling, not just AWA at the time.
Yeah. Well, I'll make 2 points about the Crusher. Number one is, for anybody that doesn't know what we're talking about as far as the 20-year feud between him and Mad Dog Vachon, the first main event for Pro Wrestling USA was going to be Crusher versus Mad Dog. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, look up Kayfabe Commentaries with Greg Gagne, and he talks about it in the Kayfabe Commentaries interview with Sean Oliver. And the other point was, I would say it came to the point where Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher were their own worst enemy.
I see that.
As far as maybe Dick the Bruiser more than the Crusher, because Dick did become a promoter and the Crusher didn't, as far as I know.
Right.
But also for those who don't know, Dick the Bruiser took over the Indianapolis territory, or the Indiana territory. I shouldn't say that. I don't know if he owned the territory, but I know he helped it along with Wilbur Schneider.
He definitely booked it.
Yeah, he definitely booked it. But either way, I would say that they became their own worst enemy.
I can see that. But having said that, they had a glorious run.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So nothing lasts forever. So it's for the new school fans who are listening to this, it's definitely worth going back and revisiting. First, the feud that we mentioned, the 20-year feud, and secondly, as a tag team, Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher, because it just standing in the ring, they would bring the house down.
Well, yeah. I mean, their feuds with the Valiant Brothers. I mean, that's where what's his name? Bobby Heenan got his start. He got his start in Indiana with the Valiant Brothers, and the Valiant Brothers fought with the Crusher and Dick the Bruiser. And I say that because, surprisingly, in that territory, Dick and the Crusher were baby faces.
Yes. Yes. That was one of the beauty of that era, that because it was so territorial and there wasn't like this so much exposure via television that we have today, you could be a babyface in one territory and be a heel in another territory and pull it off.
Well, now to bring it back to the AWA, was Crusher a heel in the AWA?
I would say about 60% of the time he was a heel, and about 40% of the time he was a babyface.
Makes sense. Well, we mentioned them before, but I'm going to throw two names out that got mainstream attention, and I say mainstream attention because that's how they ended up. The AWA is how they ended up with Vince and World Wrestling Federation. The interviewer, Mean Gene Okerlund, and manager Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Not only are they two icons, like I don't know how the viewers feel, but when I think of wrestling, no names are two faces that come to mind when I think of pro wrestling over the years. They're definitely icons, and Mean Gene. I forget where I saw this. It was some document. It might have been on the since we're on the subject of AWA, it might have been on the DVD, The Spectacular History of the AWA,
yeah,
where Mean Gene, he basically taught like people like Hogan how to cut a promo. Like without Mean Gene, there's a lot of wrestlers that wouldn't have gotten as far as they gotten. He was fantastic, and Bobby Heenan, greatest manager of all time. Period. In my opinion. I don't even think there's a close second. We could name a slew of names, but I think Bobby Heenan by far and away.
Well, we spoke about one of his favorite clients in the territory, that being Ray Stevens. But go ahead and continue about Bobby Heenan.
Yeah, Bobby Heenan. Well, first of all, people that were very WWF centric would always hear Bobby Heenan say that he was a manager of world champions, and then wonder, like, when did he manage a world champion? Like, prior to Andre, which wasn't even, technically it was DiBiase that was with Andre when he picked up the strap. It was Nick Bockwinkel. Like, Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel, that combination. And then I'm about to start jumping ahead into my favorite feud of AWA of all time, which was the Hogan Bockwinkel feud. But the whole hatred between Heenan and Hogan, it didn't start
Well, we'll get there.
Yeah, I'm jumping ahead. Mean Gene diss. I don't want to get away from this. Without Mean Gene Oakland, Eric Bischoff would have never happened. Because Eric Bischoff was basically packing meat for a living when he got the big break in the AWA, and it was because basically there was a void left behind by Mean Gene that was never filled when he left the WWE. It was never filled. They tried first people after people, and it was just never filled. And Eric Bischoff got his turn, and that's how he cut his teeth in wrestling.
Yeah. And, being honest, talking about stuff like Eric Bischoff getting a start, and, in a few minutes we'll be talking about the, other people that got their starts with Vern. But, that's the point of this discussion in this series, that we, fill the people in on where people came from.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, I agree completely. I'm gonna just throw some of my favorite names out there, and you can stop and elaborate on any of these favorite names of mine from the AWA. Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. Everybody knows him from the Killer Bees, but he was a great singles wrestler that could jump out of the building. Like he earned his name, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. His drop kick to this day is my favorite drop kick of all time. I don't know how you feel about a drop kick, but wow. Adrian Adonis and Jesse the Body Ventura as the East-West connection. Jesse Ventura, during his WWF run as an announcer, would constantly harp on how he was a tag team champion. Again, most people don't know or are unaware that it was in the AWA that he was a tag team champion. It was not in the WWF. Ken Patera. Ken Patera had the potential to be as big as a superstar Billy Graham or as big as Lex Luger went on to be. He was that kind of a guy. He was that kind of a performer. The muscle guy and he had the full Nelson before Billy Jack Haynes, whom I love, by the way. Before a lot of people. He had the full Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he had his personal problems, and I don't know if you want to elaborate on those personal problems or not, but.
Well, if you have a brick and you live near McDonald's, then we can. But.
Fair enough. All right, and then here's a guy that had all the potential in the world and blew it. Dr. D. David Schultz. Dr. D. The whole reason he was brought over to the WWF to feud with Hogan when Hogan first became champion in the WWF was because he was one of those big time heels in the AWA that basically Vince hoarded. He wanted all their best talent, and he was one of those best talents. And I don't know if you want to elaborate on how Dr. D. David Schultz blew it, but yeah, he blew it.
Well, what I will say is, just with all the names that you named, that just shows how much talent Vince took from AWA.
Oh, and that's not even the half of it.
Yeah, and I'll even go as far to say that he even, if I remember correctly, I think Brian Blair came to Vince from Florida, so it's like he took one from over here and one from down here and brought them together.
Right.
And I'll just say that the chemistry that those two had from never being a team before the WWE, I mean, it's, I'm not a fan. I mean, from their, from other stuff that I've heard and stuff that I'm not, it's more Brian Blair, but Brian, they seem like nice guys, but it just, how do I put, I guess there's a reason why they're not as remembered as maybe they should be.
Well, one of the biggest travesties in pro wrestling history is that they never wore the WWF strap. They never wore the WWF's tag team champions officially.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. But, I mean, maybe one of them's not on good terms with Vince.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which, things will change when Vince isn't there anymore, if you catch my drift, but...
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure they'll get their turn in the Hall of Fame eventually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if Bruno and Billy Graham can, redo their personal problems with Vince and the WWE, and especially the Warrior, there's no, you can't say, "Oh, I'll never forgive him," because if they did,
right.
Anybody
can.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. I mean, even the high flyers in the AWA, Jim Brunzell and Greg Gagne.
Yes, the high flyers. They lived up to their name.
Yeah.
One of the big steals, since we're talking about AWA, the exodus from AWA to WWF, one of the big steals early on was Wendy Richter.
That's right, because she was AWA Women's Champion.
Yeah, that was part of the Rock and Wrestling connection that sparked the WWF's big growth.
Yeah.
And so, Wendy Richter, I mean, luckily for the AWA, they were able to replace her eventually with Sherry Martel, but even she did the exodus. So...
Well, by the time she left, the company was, on their last legs anyway.
Right, true.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Wendy Richter jumping over, that was huge. That was right up there, believe it or not, with Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Hogan's the more remembered of the two. But, remember, it was Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter was that angle. That eventually led into, bringing in Hogan and Piper and all that. But it was really Cyndi Lauper and Wendy Richter.
Yeah. Well...
And a producer called David Wolf, who was famous back then, but most people today don't remember who he was.
Well, now I give you the floor to talk about the feud that you've been tightroping around for
right.
the last half hour. Bach and Hogan.
Yes. Well, first of all, let me set the stage. Hogan was the Hulkamania Hogan that we know in WWF wasn't born on the date that they claim it was in 1984. He was already hugely popular in the AWA. Hugely popular.
Mm-hmm.
And he was having behind the scenes arguments, for lack of a better term. He was clashing behind the scenes over merchandise percentage. What percentage was he supposed to get of the merchandise sales? Because he knew his popularity.
Yeah.
And so the feud that would ensue was supposed to be Hogan's crowning moment as world champion, where Nick Bockwinkel, who was basically the AWA's Ric Flair in that he held the title many times, and he was their top heel.
Yeah.
He was their, he was supposed to basically pass the torch to Hulk Hogan. But Vern Gagne couldn't come into an agreement with Hogan over the merchandise sales, which is, it sounds petty today, but back then it was not petty at all. Back then it was a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
There was no guaranteed contracts back then. So having said all that, Hogan did win the title, but then in one of the major screw jobs that in pro wrestling history, the title was stripped off of Hogan, and correct me if I'm wrong, he never officially the official verdict is that he didn't hold the title, and it doesn't count towards his championship reigns.
Yep,
it was
true.
given back to Nick Bockwinkel. Now you would think that'd be the end of it, right? It was not, because it wouldn't be a good feud if it wasn't. Hogan would face Nick Bockwinkel again, and then again beat Bockwinkel, only to once again have the title stripped from him and given back to Bockwinkel, and yet a second screw job. So those are two title reigns that Hogan never had that he's supposed to have.
Well, but
he would have had, and he wouldn't have got screwed if at any point he would have came to an agreement over the merchandise percentage.
Well, I respect Vern Gagne for what he was able to do in the wrestling business, but he basically killed his biggest star by doing that.
He worse than that, he killed. In my opinion, that was the cyanide that the AWA drank that would eventually lead to their death via poisoning.
Yeah.
The poison of fighting over that percentage of merchandise sales. In hindsight, he should have just gave Hogan what he asked for, which I believe. I'm not gonna say I believe. If people believe Hogan was 50% of the merchandise sales, of the merchandise profits.
Well, yeah, I think Hogan wanted more. Vern wanted all of it or most of it, and Hogan didn't think that was fair, and so they spat.
Vern was taking something like 80% and was giving Hogan 20, and Hogan wanted 50, and so the two were so far apart they couldn't come to the middle. They couldn't come to an agreement, and Vince McMahon, you don't give a man like that opportunities.
Well, I think they also even had a somewhat of a fight backstage, and Hogan won, and Vern got pissed.
Yeah. Well, Hogan's a big guy.
Wow. Yeah. But for those who don't know, number one, Hogan, at this time, I think either Hogan was living in Arizona or he went to Arizona. Possibly that's where Linda was living. And he sent a letter to Vern Gagne basically telling him, it was over Christmas or something like that. He sent a letter to Vern Gagne, or maybe Thanksgiving. It was the end of 1983, and he said, "I'm not coming back." Vern didn't believe it at first, so he threw it away, and then when Hogan didn't come back, he realized, oh shit, he's really not coming back.
Yeah.
And then at the end of 1983, he reappeared in the World Wrestling Federation, and I guess what you can say is, as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah. Like I said, Vince McMahon can create magic. No one needs to throw that man a bone. And he got thrown more than a bone. He got a big, fat Christmas present in the form of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
and, oh man. And that was the first domino of many that would fall, that would lead to the end of the AWA. Not only forever, well, first of all, as we knew it at the time, but then eventually as forever.
Yeah. Well,
he was still blessed with talent. He still had the Midnight Rockers. He still, which was Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, who would eventually become the Rockers. He still had Scott Hall, who would eventually become Razor Ramon. He still had Kurt Hennig, who would eventually become Mr. Perfect. But as I'm kind of illustrating here, those would become the next set of dominoes that would fall.
Well, and then in Scott's defense, he was one of the few that left after the company went out of business and would get a job in with Ted Turner down in Atlanta.
Yeah, he went there and he became, I believe it was the Diamond Stud, or?
Yeah, the Diamond Stud, with Diamond Dallas Page, who also left from the AWA.
Yeah, Diamond Dallas Page, exactly. He was a manager in the AWA. I believe he managed Bad Company, which were feuding with the Midnight Rockers at the time.
Yeah, and also Paul Heyman got his start in the AWA.
Yes, as Paulie Dangerously had, see, we're bringing up all these amazing names. It's like no matter how far we dig, we keep coming up with great names of some of the biggest people in pro wrestling history that were there in the AWA. And damn, one move is what killed it all. One move.
Well, yeah, and I believe, if I'm correct, Paulie left the AWA for Memphis and then left Memphis to go to Jim Crockett Promotions. But that's beside the point. What I wanted to actually bring up was to go back to what... Go ahead.
I was just going to quickly throw in there the Fabulous Freebirds were there as well.
Oh, yeah.
But go on, you were going to mention it.
The fact that typically the AWA only did one angle the entire year.
Yeah, that was okay. I'll give you that. In that the AWA, their how do I put it? Their approach to booking was wrestling first. Like they cared more about the wrestling than they did about characters, storylines, and that's because Vern Gagne, I think I used the term earlier. He was a shooter. He was somebody who knew how to really wrestle, which is also why I think his pride was hurt that he got his ass kicked by Hulk Hogan, who was not a shooter. I think we all agree.
Yeah, but Hulk is, he doesn't have 24-inch pythons for nothing.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the problem. One of the criticisms of the booking was that he focused so much on the wrestling that who could wrestle a match, not who could perform a match. That basically the stories stories suffered to where it wasn't until they were on ESPN and towards the end that they started to focus a little bit more on storylines. But even then, the storylines were centered around the title pictures.
Well, but that's the thing. It's when they became a nationally televised company, I'm not saying they should have looked at Vince and said, okay, let's do that. No, you should have looked at Jim Crockett and say, let's do that, but differently, because I don't know. Like I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but I feel like when you have storylines built up around a match, the match gets more meaning.
I agree. Well, that's the tried and true method. That's the method that's proven itself over a very, very, very long stretch of time. So yeah, I completely agree. Having said that, they figured that out too late in the game. When Jerry Lawler got there and held the AWA title, and Larry Zbyszko was there, and that whole era, they had figured that out, but it was too late. The Titanic was sinking.
Yeah,
there was no stopping the Titanic that was sinking. I think it was Jerry Lawler, I forget what interview, it might have been a magazine interview, where he called that locker room the band that played on while the Titanic sunk.
Well, now we move to the back end, and we move to talking about a few other names. I just wanted to mention that Eric Bischoff actually got his start in the AWA as an office boy, and then I think he replaced an announcer that no-showed. I don't want to mention the guy's name. I don't remember. I don't know if it was the right guy. So I'm just gonna say that the guy no-showed. I think that's what happened, and he replaced him, and then the guy just never showed up again. Which at that time it was not as bad as it was, because even Eric said that he was eating basically pork and beans all day. I mean, all the time, and him and his family, were struggling to make ends meet, and that's when he knew, but he was loyal to Vern to the very end. I know people would say, be very critical of Eric Bischoff, but just the loyalty he showed to Vern in the dying days of the company. In some cases you could say a guy like, no offense to Baron von Raschke, but by the time the AWA was done, I think it was to the point where Baron probably could have hung up the boots and retired, if not being paid as much as he was from Vern.
Yeah, no question. They had a lot of aging talent. You mentioned Bob Rasky. I mentioned Nick Bockwinkel. They had a lot of aging talent, and all their best young talent, like the Road Warriors, like I mentioned the Freebirds, and they left.
Yeah.
All their best young talent. If they weren't leaving to WWF, they were leaving over to Ted Turner. They basically they got pillaged, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. Well, it's also the fact that it became clear Vern didn't care about the young stars.
There was one young star that he cared about. There was one. His name was Jimmy Stewart, who was their light heavyweight champion at the time. And he stayed until the company died. And then when the company was brought back under Dale Gagne, I think I'm skipping ahead again, he came back. And he was one of their bookers, as well as one of their talents. But Jimmy Stewart, I love the guy because I know him personally. Because of when Vern Gagne's AWA died, he never developed into what would have been.
Well, let me guess. Jimmy Stewart is an amateur wrestler or has some form of amateur background.
Of course. Of course. But he could work the stick. He was blessed with the gift of gab. In fact, in my opinion, he happened in the wrong era. If he'd have happened during the WCW Cruiserweight era, he would have been huge. But when he happened, that era did not exist yet. The smaller guys didn't get the time of day.
Well, basically what you're saying is he was the better version of Brad Riggins.
Better version of Brad Riggins, and I'll say better version of Terry Taylor.
I don't think you should say that. Terry Taylor may get mad.
Terry Taylor's got a great eye for talent. I'll give him that, though. Behind the scenes, he's one of the best.
Well,
and he had great runs. His match against Nikita Koloff was awesome.
Well, I mean, it took us 45 minutes to piss somebody off, so.
Yeah, but Jimmy Stewart had a lot of upside that we just never saw because of the fall of the AWA.
Well, it took
his loyalty.
I'll say this: it took a lot longer than last time for us to piss somebody off. So, Terry, if you're listening, we meant it personally.
I've never met Terry Taylor, but he seems like a nice guy. I have met Jimmy Stewart a few times, and for a guy that had so much upside and so much potential, he is not bitter. Like if I were him, I'd be like hard to be around. But he's actually not bitter. He's a cool dude.
Well, one of the names, or two of the names that I wanted to mention that won the titles in the later days, one of which beat Nick Bockwinkel for the belt, and actually got to keep the belt, sorry Hulk, was the man later known as Mr. Perfect.
Yes. The great Kurt Hennig. Here we go again. Another guy that could wrestle with anybody toe to toe. He got put over. He's a second generation wrestler. His father, Larry Axe Hennig, was amazing.
Huge in the AWA too.
Yeah, exactly. And just on a personal note, like I have a big neck, but that dude had a neck. I don't see how anybody could put any kind of a stranglehold on that man. But that put aside, Kurt Hennig was a supreme talent. That was his only world title of his career, was in the AWA. Another one of those travesties of pro wrestling history.
Well, I'll say this, to talk about what you talked about with Jimmy Stewart. If Perfect was in a different era, or even later, or if it was something like the Mark Henry effect, where he was able to remain in the same company for an extended period of time, then I think he would have been given a short run with the belt just to say thank you.
Agreed.
Like Mark was given when he won the world title.
And if he would have been around back when the brand split happened in the WWE, where it was SmackDown had the WWE Championship and Raw had the World Heavyweight Championship, and there was an ECW Championship as well. If he would have been in that era, he would have been a many time world champion.
Yeah, definitely. And the other name I wanted to mention, if we could just gloss over his run before that and focus on his run with Vern. The heat that Larry Zbyszko got from his feud with Bruno Sammartino, I would say, carried him to the run that he had with Vern and becoming the AWA World Heavyweight Champion.
We mentioned defining feuds earlier. That is a defining feud.
Yeah.
Wow, that was for sure one of the top feuds of all time. Now, having said that, Larry Zbyszko, correct me if I'm wrong. In fact, I'm about 95% sure of this. He was the last champion.
Yes.
Under Vern Gagne.
Yes.
And when Dale came back, he returned as champion. Before he got the. I think he stayed as champion. Actually, I don't think he ever lost a championship under Dale either. Now that I'm thinking about it, he just stayed. He was one of those. He was just but the Dale era didn't last too long. It lasted about 5 years, 4 years, maybe that. But yeah, he was the last champion, and in Jim Crockett's, he had a run with Jim Crockett Promotions. I just feel like he never got his due.
I agree.
As an announcer, he was over as an announcer. Every Monday Nitro, people would chant his name, but I just never felt like in the WCW he ever got his due.
I agree. I mean, I will say, without the feud with Bruno, I think Larry Zbyszko is more of a territorial talent. But because of the feud with Bruno, that I think could have given him, especially if he would have stayed with Vince, that would have given him the heat to be world champion had he actually won a match against Bruno.
Yeah, no, I can see why he left, but at the same time, because he did get his run in the AWA, and it was just bad luck for his career.
Yeah,
that the AWA went under.
Yeah.
But I can see why he left. Like I said, he got his run.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he left and he was at the bottom of the bench in the AWA. He was the man in the AWA, just bad luck.
Yeah. Speaking of bad luck, I would be adverse not to talk about the Stan Hansen incident with the AWA World Heavyweight title.
Wow. Well, first of all, before we get too deep into it, Stan Hansen was a worthy champion. I want to get that out the way.
I agree completely. I think he never got his due in the States, possibly because of his attitude backstage.
Right.
But, and it was also very strange to see Stan Hansen as world champion in the AWA.
Yeah, especially since he didn't fit the mold that the AWA kind of established of, the guy with the shooting ability, the amateur background. He didn't fit none of that. But I don't know if it was genius or they just fell into it. I don't know what it was. I liked it. I think it worked. It was the departure that was sorely needed.
Yeah, and, the fact that he shipped the title back from Japan, I guess you could say it was the end of a relationship that may have needed to end.
Right. No question. Yeah, you know what, for the fans who might be like, what in the hell are they talking about? Let's put some context into this.
Okay.
We're being fans right now, and we're like, yeah, but we're not giving the context here. All right, so in pro wrestling history, it's kind of always been a way to not legitimize, but to give a lot of cred to a world title. Seems like to me to put it around a Japanese guy in Japan. It's just kind of a thing that pro wrestling, the big promotions have always done.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think there was a little some of that at play here in the AWA. What do you think?
I mean, I could see that. I guess Vern may have known Stan's status in Japan as a major star, and he thought that Stan commuting back and forth, holding the AWA World Heavyweight title, would have been, something. But if I had to guess, Vern and his demands probably did another top star in.
Well, I'm with you on that. But yeah, like you said, he was a top star in Japan, Stan Hansen. But he was American.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why somebody like him who didn't fit the mold got the call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, another thing we would be well adverse not to talk. It would be wrong to discuss the AWA and not mention the Wrestle Rock Rumble.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just put this out there. When Dale Gagne operated the AWA when it returned and had a brief run until Vince shut it down, he actually did a Wrestle Rock event, and I wrestled at Wrestle Rock in a match where the Honky Tonk Man was involved and the Patriot was involved. But and Johnny Stewart was involved. But having said all of that, though, what you're talking about was actually in the Vern Gagne version of the AWA, and holy smokes, where to begin with this one?
How about the music video?
Oh, you had to go there. Music videos were popular back then. Like the Chicago Bears had the Super Bowl Shuffle video, and it was just, it was kind of what like everybody was doing. The wrestling album, the WWF had the wrestling album that would come out, and I see where Dale Gagne was, but he's not hip. Dale Gagne was never that kind of a guy. He was not the guy to do a music, to come up with any kind of music video ideas. And if you fans listening to this ever see this on YouTube, let me just say I'm sorry. I'm sorry you watched it. There's no way to unwatch it.
Oh, and I thought you were being. No. Well, I mean, admittedly, Nick Bockwinkel and Larry Zbyszko were the best parts of the video. They were really good.
Well, okay, but I see that you liked it.
I mean, I liked parts of it. Other parts of it were like
cheese with extra cheese.
Yeah.
That's the way I kind of took it. I can see why you like. I like Nick Bockwinkel, so
yeah.
That man can do no wrong in my. He's one of my favorites. So okay, I'll agree with you because I'm a mark from Nick Bockwinkel.
Yeah.
But yeah. But continue on. There's more to the Wrestle Rock Rumble than just the music video.
That's. Go ahead.
Talk about the stadium and the attendance.
Sure.
Well, first of all, let's just throw out the disclaimer. Filling a stadium is not an easy thing to do.
Well, I presume they went to Comiskey Park, right? Or for one of them. Because I know Comiskey Park used to be a hotbed for wrestling.
Right. And, yeah, that was like their... Would you say what they were trying to achieve was like something what like the Crockett's had achieved with what's the Great American Bash Tour, because that was successful.
Yeah, I mean, probably, yeah. And, also you had Fritz down in Texas going to Texas Stadium.
Right.
Yearly.
So I can see where Dale wanted to say, here we are, we're the AWA, we have all this talent, we should be doing that too. I can totally see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in spite of the fact that they didn't fill the stadium to capacity, it was still a crap load of people.
Well, I mean, to quote, I want to say Jim Cornette, the first year Fritz did it, it was an event that needed a stadium. Every other year after that, it was a stadium that needed an event.
Yeah. That's a great, Jim Cornette. You gotta give it to him.
Yeah. So I guess in the case of Vern Gagne, it was a stadium that needed an event.
No, yeah, they didn't fill it up. They did. They were. If you guys, in fact, the spectacular history of the AWA kind of touched on, or at least showed video footage of, like, there was a lot of people, and if this would have happened in an arena, it probably still wouldn't have filled up the arena, but damn, it would have looked good.
Yeah.
But in a stadium, when you have, like, basically the whole upper deck empty, and then you have, like, two sides with people, and then you have another two sides without, like, yeah, you kind of just kicked yourself in the nuts.
Yeah. Well, to move to a more positive ending, what do you think the legacy of Vern Gagne and the American Wrestling Association is to the professional wrestling business?
Well, it's a multifaceted legacy, but I think on the top it would have to be wrestling on television. That was the game changer that we all take for granted today. Basically today you can't be a major promotion without television.
That's true.
All right, fair. And then I think the other thing was that they were the #1 promotion for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, as Vince was trying to get his, built up. Well, to be fair, they probably became the #1 when in the time between Vince Jr. and Vince Sr. Considering Vince Sr. went back to the NWA for a time.
Yeah, they went back to the NWA, and not only that, but I would say they were #1 in like the 50s, not the 50s, but like 60s and around that era when when wrestling was new to TV, and the AWA was more visible than maybe some of the NWA territories. The NWA would probably, over the long haul, you could probably say their title was more prestigious because they were the older title and all that. But the AWA had the viewership, and today we kind of measure success. Maybe because I have a modern mindset. Today we measure success via ratings.
Yeah.
They had the ratings.
Well, I mean, they were first, as you said. They were first on national television. And then I presume Georgia was second, and Joe Blanchard was right around there with the USA Network. But AWA was first. They were first on national television.
They were first, and they were first for a while.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a few months later we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Everything happened in years back then.
Well, I would say Georgia probably didn't get on TBS. TBS wasn't formed until the late 70s, so...
Right, yeah. So, we're talking the 60s and 70s. Wow, that's a long time to be #1.
Yeah.
So that's a good legacy. That's a great legacy.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, and that just shows, the part of the history that fans don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and what was one thing that we didn't touch on, I just want to throw it out there.
Okay.
AWA did some unique things that other promotions were scared to do. They had the NWA champion defend on AWA cards. They had the USWA get merged with the AWA title. The WCCW title get merged with the AWA title, and they had the Unified World Champion for a while. They had a lot of gumption to do some things that others weren't willing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's maybe also part of that legacy.
Yep, I agree. That's the problem, that fans don't seem to pay attention to the legacy. I mean, the history and the legacy of other promotions, because yes, history is told by the winners, but it could also be retold by us.
Oh, good point. And that's part of the fun of revisiting the history.
I agree.
Set the record straight.
I agree. And with that being said, if you liked the video, feel free to let us know down in the comment section below what your favorite memory is of the AWA. Or if you want to just praise the series or what have you, let us know down in the comment section, because as always, feedback is more than welcome and appreciated. But if you don't want to leave a comment, you can always leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. And before we go, I just want to thank Billy Garcia once again for joining me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I have fun reminiscing about all these great promotions. I can't wait till the next one. There's just been some awesome promotions down in Memphis, down in Philadelphia, hint, hint, wink, wink. So I can't wait to come back and do it again next month.
Yep, sounds great, my friend.